I helped my brother with his medical bills, but now my entitled sister expects me to buy her a penthouse, and my mother is furious that I refused. I, 36, female, am the oldest of 3 kids. My brother Percy, 34, male, and the youngest of us is my sister Molly, 28, female. Growing up, Percy and I were raised normally, but for some reason Molly was treated like she was literally the princess. I guess it was the fact that she was kind of a surprise for our parents, and then we add to the fact that she was the youngest, she was always treated differently. And I think that's part of the reason why she grew up to be a totally spoiled brat. My dad had some sense and would still reprimand her and try to get her to behave, but my mother, no. There was no chance that she would ever say a word against her dearest Molly. And neither would she tolerate it if anybody else dared to speak up against her behavior, which was obnoxious to say the least. Percy and I were significantly older than her, so until the age of 25, we just took everything that she said with a pinch of salt and tried not to mind. Mind you, she said some pretty horrible stuff to us when she was in her teens. Not only did she constantly make fun of our appearance, since she believed that she was the prettiest of us all, but the worst part was that we couldn't even deny it because she did inherit our mother's genes, and she actually was quite attractive. But on top of that, she would also make fun of weird stuff like the majors we had chosen, the line of work that we were in, and whatnot. One time at Thanksgiving, we got into a major fight with her because she had just straight up told Percy that he was going to be an unemployed burden on the family just because he was a literature major. And another time, we ended up not speaking for weeks because she had told me that if I continued to work for hours every day, I would never be able to find a boyfriend with my eye bags since nobody wants people who aren't even attractive and, on top of that, can't even give them time. So this is just the kind of person that she is, overly boisterous, egoistic, and constantly belittling people around her. She has always been this way, and this kind of behavior has only ever been encouraged by our mother. My dad just turned a blind eye, but my mother used to laugh at the things that she said, no matter how hurt the other person felt. She would always pass it off as a joke, even though we could tell from Molly's face that she was completely serious, and she would tell us not to get offended at it. And she would claim that we were being sensitive if we tried to retaliate. So Molly always had our mother wrapped around her finger. We hated her for that. And then, 8 years ago, after my father passed away, we finally started drifting apart, and both Percy and I started seeing less of our mother and Molly. I guess, in spite of the fact that he also favored Molly, maybe not as much as our mother did, but to a certain extent, he was still the glue that was holding the family together, and once he was gone, Percy and I really didn't feel like visiting Molly and our mother on the holidays or seeing them as often as we used to when our father had fallen sick. So after his demise, we would only meet them at family events hosted by other people, occasionally on Thanksgiving, and maybe on Christmas some years if we felt like it. We were honestly better off for it because they did not try to keep in touch with us either. And since my dad was pretty well off and so was my mother, they had enough money to get by. And Percy and I had also managed to build a life for ourselves separately. It was like Percy and I were on one side, and my mother and Molly were on the other, and there was this wall between us. I personally like the wall. And anyway, that's how the relationship has been between the 4 of us, and so I really don't think that they should have any expectations from me, because I don't have any from them. But recently, I learned that the situation on their end might be a little different. A couple of weeks ago, I helped Percy out with his medical bills after he had fractured his ankle. And since his insurance only covered hospital bills, I had to take care of all the other expenses, like his medication, visits to the physiotherapist, and hiring a full-time nurse for him so he would have someone to help him out since he lives alone. He tried to convince me not to pay for all of this, since he could really afford it, but he was in between jobs right now. And I really didn't want him to spend his money until he had been able to establish his online magazine that he had been planning to start, which is why he had quit his teaching job in the first place. Besides, I'm the CFO of a company, and we are doing pretty well financially, so money is not a problem for me, and I was glad to help my brother out. But for some reason, when my mother and Molly found out about it, they thought that this was a free pass to ask me for anything that they wanted, and I was just going to hand it out to them like I was Santa Claus. And that's why I'm in this situation right now, because I said no to helping out Molly with buying her first apartment. So, obviously that really pissed her and my mother off real bad. 3 days ago, I randomly received a phone call from Molly while I was working, and she told me that she had found an apartment that she really liked. And she wanted to buy it because now that she was 28, it was getting embarrassing for her to tell everybody that she was still living with her mother. So she wanted to move out, and she needed my help to pay for the apartment since she could only manage half of the price. Since it was a penthouse apartment and they're insanely expensive, she knew that I had helped Percy with his medical expenses, so now she wanted a favor from me too. It was so bizarre because for the last 8 Years we had barely had a proper conversation, and every time that we did meet, it was mostly out of obligation. And even then she would find it very hard to be nice to us, and now she thought that I was just going to agree to pay for her first apartment? For context, Molly is a freelance graphic designer, and I would have respected that if she did any work at all. She's never been to any sort of design school, doesn't have a degree in design, and I don't think just making a couple of posters for our father's business that he didn't even end up using qualifies her as a graphic designer. So naturally, she can pretend all she wants that she only works with exclusive clients. But these exclusive clients are mostly family, and even then, she only gets the opportunity to work with them because my mother forces them to give her jobs to keep her busy. It's a hobby at best, but it's not a job, and it's not surprising that she has ended up living with our mother until now. I told her straight up that I was not going to help her out with anything. She was 28, she could find a real job and pay for the apartment herself. She argued that I had helped Percy out with his medical expenses, even though he had the money and she really didn't, and nobody was trying to help her out either. So, as the oldest sibling, it was kind of my duty to look after her. But I told her that the situation with Percy was different because I had helped him out since he was in between jobs and also because he has a good relationship with me that he has bothered to put effort into. That's not the case with her, and I don't need to help her out. Obviously, I did not say any of this to her, I just said no, and then I hung up. She tried to call me a couple more times, but I just muted her and ignored her for the rest of the day. When I came back home, I received a phone call from my mother, and she was pretty pissed. It was not unexpected in the slightest, since I knew saying no to her daughter would make her very mad. So I was ready to fight with her, but in the beginning, she just started whining about how unfair everyone was being to poor Molly and that she had not expected me to play favorites among my siblings. She went on to tell me that Molly had finalized this apartment after looking for a really long time, and now that she wanted to move in there, she obviously first went to ask for help from Uncle, my dad's younger brother, who is now running the family business. Since after my father's death, it had been very clear to me right from the beginning that in case anything happened to my father, he was going to take over the business, which is why I went a different way. Because I did not want to be working in the family business. And as for Percy and Molly, neither of them were interested in taking it forward anyway, so our uncle took over the business. My dad's equity shares were transferred to my mother after he passed, according to his will, and now she lives comfortably off of that money. It's a pretty successful company, but I guess my dad had not accounted for the fact that Molly would still be living off of their money even after so many years. And she doesn't live a normal lifestyle either, she likes to live extravagantly, and so my mother has not been able to save up enough, which is why she was relying on me to help out with the apartment. Since she said that if she ended up giving her the money this time, things would get easier for her in the future because she was finding it more and more difficult to support Molly. It was literally all that I could do not to roll my eyes at her, and I told her that this was not my problem to deal with. So she could tell Molly to either get a real job and maintain a stable source of income so she would be able to afford the kind of home that she wanted, or just suck it up and continue living with her mother until she was 35. Then my mom got really mad and started telling me that I was being ungrateful and that I wouldn't be in a position to argue with her had it not been the way that my parents had raised me. So now I needed to pay off my debts by helping out my siblings. I didn't even understand what that logic was, so I told her that my decision was final and was about to hang up when she said that if I was going to act like this, then she would be left with no other option but to go no contact with me. That was really bold of her because, judging from the past 8 years, I think we are already pretty much low contact with each other. So going completely no contact might not make as much of a difference as she believes it would. Her threat really pissed me off, so I told her that, after our dad passed away, Percy and I had made our peace with the fact that now things would be very different since we knew that she had her favorite. And so, she had no right to tell me that it was unfair of me to play favorites among my siblings. It was fair, and I was doing it. I was not even going to pretend to be sorry about it. And then I also told her that she was free to go no contact with me if she wanted to because I was used to that kind of treatment from her. To her, nobody apart from Molly even existed, and she had stopped treating us like her own children and acted like we were also supposed to live and breathe for her sake, just like she did. Well, I had my own life, and so did Percy, and we did not owe anything to her or Molly. Once I said that, I felt really relieved because I finally got it out of my system, and my mother yelled at me, saying that after everything that I had said, she was definitely going to make sure that she never spoke to me again. I just chuckled and told her that, like I had said just now, I was fine with that. And it was great that she had made this decision so quickly because now I wouldn't even have to invite her to my wedding and maybe I could make space for somebody else who's more deserving. That's what Really caught her attention, but before she could ask me about it, I hung up and then I blocked her and Molly both. So, Molly had been wrong. People actually do want to date career-driven, ambitious women, because otherwise I wouldn't have found my boyfriend, Jackson 37, male, and we wouldn't have been together for almost 5 years. My mother and Molly have both met him a couple of times, but he knows about the relationship between us. And a couple of weeks ago, after we got engaged, we decided to have a very small and private engagement party to celebrate us, and we are getting married in a couple of months. I had been contemplating whether I wanted my mother and Molly at the ceremony, and eventually decided that maybe I would invite them just for the sake of being nice, but now I did not feel that it was necessary. So that was pretty satisfying. But yesterday, it was Jackson who received a message from my mother on social media. She told him that I had blocked her and Molly everywhere. But she just wanted me to know that she was incredibly disappointed with me, and said that since I had shown her where she stood, she and Molly had decided to cut me off permanently, and said that she hoped that I was happy that I had finally ended whatever little family connection that we had. I don't understand why they're blaming me, but I feel really bad about it. So, I eat here for telling my mother that I was fine with her cutting me off? Update 1. Hi everyone. So, first and foremost, thank you so much for all the love and support you guys have shown me in the comments section. It made me realize that I was being stupid and emotional, and I didn't need to worry about my mother's feelings. They have never worried about my feelings. So I spoke to Percy about this as well, and he was of the same opinion as many of you in the comments section. They were just trying to manipulate me with their words, and trying to play on my emotions to get me to apologize to them. But I did not need to fall for it because I knew where I stood, and I had done the right thing. When Jackson and I had discussed this, he was the one who had told me that my mother and Molly seemed really hurt by my behavior, and that was kind of why I'd been feeling guilty about it. Obviously, he hadn't exactly said that he thought that I was guilty and that I should apologize, but I could tell that he was finding the situation entirely awful, and was trying his best to be on my side without feeling bad. For my mother and Molly. But then I kind of realized that Jackson was really close to his family, so it was probably hard for him to see things turning out like this. And whenever he had met my mother and Molly, they had always been on their best behavior, so maybe he just didn't know exactly how strained our relationship was. So I got Percy to explain things to him, and after that, Jackson's opinion changed almost instantly. He told me that his parents had never acted like that with him and his siblings. If they had, he would have cut them off without any second thought as well. So now, since all of this has been sorted out, all of us have blocked the two of them. It finally feels good to be severing ties with them after so long of putting up a front and maintaining this pretense that we are still a family when we haven't been a family for a long time. In fact, for as long as I can remember, my mother has preferred Molly over me and Percy, and now we prefer our own peace of mind over my mother. I'm actually pretty thankful that this happened because I think this sort of confrontation was much needed, or else we would have continued putting up an act for the sake of other people our entire lives. Update 2. Hey, it's been a week since I last spoke to my mother. After that, we had blocked the two of them, and so Percy and I had no idea what was happening with them. But this morning, we were contacted by our uncle. He told me that apparently my mother had decided to transfer half of her shares to Molly, and he didn't say anything about it. But he thought that this was a terrible idea because Molly was incompetent, and he did not think that my mother should do something like this. So he reached out to us and said that he wanted us to speak to our mother and convince her not to do this. At first, we did not know what the big deal was, but then my uncle explained that not only was my mother transferring those shares, but she was also demanding that Molly be given voting power in the company. As the person who was actually in charge and running the company, that would spell trouble for him, but he did not want to have that conversation with my mother because she was pretty insistent on these things. And he just wanted to stay out of it. So, my mother also had voting powers as a shareholder, but so far, she had always refrained from exercising them because she believed that whatever my uncle decided would be for the best. However, now she was placing her demands, and my uncle did not want Molly to have any shares or power in the matter relating to the company, since she was very incompetent and had no business acumen whatsoever. And this is why he had come to us to ask for our help. Honestly, if I had been in his position, then I probably would have freaked out the same way because Molly, as a shareholder, was given the power to vote in my company. Nope, I would not like that at all. So, after a brief discussion with Percy, we came to the conclusion that we could not let this happen and decided to visit our mother and talk to her in person about this. Our uncle had been pretty desperate, and we didn't want to let him down because after our father passed, he had really looked out for us and always been there. He was a nice person. He did not deserve to go through this kind of trouble. So that's why we bothered to interact with our mother a second time after we had promised ourselves that we would never speak to her again. Anyway, we went to her place, and of course, Molly was there, as we knew that her presence would make this entire discussion much more difficult than it needed to be. But we had made a promise, and we needed to live up to it. So we ignored her, and we went to our mother and told her that we had heard from our uncle that she was demanding that he give her voting powers in the company. And we were there to tell her that this was a completely stupid idea. At first, she just ignored us, but then we repeated ourselves and told her that she couldn't continue to ignore us since what we were here to discuss was pretty important. Then she finally looked up and said that we had no right to tell her what to do and what not to do, because after the way that she had been treated by both of us, she had no interest in speaking to either of us and wanted us to leave. Molly entered the room and said that if she wanted to be an active participant in the company that Dad had built, an opportunity that neither of us had taken up because we did not think it was valuable enough, then we had no right to come back here and start acting as if we owned the place just because now we were jealous of her. I had to try really hard to keep my cool because I did not want to blow this, but I tried to reason with my mother and told her that our father would not want this either because even when he was alive, he had said that he did not want us getting involved in the company. And if his brother wanted something to happen, then that's what would happen. So now his brother wanted Molly to stay out of the company, and I just really wanted my mother to consider that, since if she went against that, then she would be disrespecting my dad. That seemed to give them some pause, but I guess Molly figured out that if my mother was actually thinking this over, then her chances of becoming part of the company would be screwed. So she started a fight with me and said that I had already decided that I was going to cut them off, so it would be better for me to leave before they called the cops, since I made it very clear that we were not family anymore, so this was no place for me to be. But Percy told her to back off, and I tried to continue reasoning with my mother because I could tell that I was getting somewhere. I reminded her that my dad had made it very clear that he did not want any of us getting involved in the matter relating to the company, because he had put a lot of hard work and time into building this from the ground up. And the only person he trusted after himself was his brother. He had literally said that to us so many times. This is exactly the kind of thing that he did not want to happen. He did not want any legal drama or any fights over the company, and we had all agreed to respect that. And this is one of the reasons why I had left the family business to pave my own way, since I did not want to disrespect what my father had said. And at least I had some business background. Molly had no acumen at all and would have no idea whatsoever what to do. So I begged her to rethink this and told her that we could keep our differences aside for the sake of our father so that we would not end up disrespecting his last wishes. All through this, Molly just kept screaming at us and said that I was jealous of her, that I could not stand to see her happy. And that's why I was trying to talk our mother out of this. But my mother just stayed there silently. Eventually, she told all of us to shut up and asked me and Percy to leave and said that she would think about it and let my uncle know. But now she wanted us to stay away because we had been very disrespectful towards her, and she had found it very insulting that we had blocked her, so she wanted nothing to do with us. We were forced to leave, but Molly stayed, and right now, Percy and I are just praying that she has changed her mind about what she wants to do and is no longer going to demand that my uncle make Molly more involved in matters related to the company. I've spoken to Jackson about it, and he told me that I did my best in spite of my bad relationship with my mother, and now it's up to her. At least I can just tell my uncle that I tried, and that should be enough. So I've spoken to my uncle, and he's not too confident because we still haven't heard anything from our mother. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed that she changes her mind about Molly. Update 3. Hey, so it's been 2 weeks, and we recently found out from our uncle that after a lot of deliberation, my mother has agreed that Molly definitely does not deserve to get a say in how the company should be run, since my father had made that very clear, that whatever his brother says goes. And if he says that Molly has not earned her place, then that's what should be respected. So she's not going to get voting rights, but she is definitely getting preferred shares of the company. My mother transferred some of her shares to Molly, and now, at least she will have a stable income. I'm just thankful that my dad's company is not going to drown because of her. However, my mother and I still have no contact, and the same goes for Percy. Also, guys, just for your information, just because our father did not leave us any share of the company does not mean that he didn't leave us anything. He only left shares of the company to my mother, but Percy, Molly, and I received other assets as inheritance that I don't think are relevant, which is why I did not mention them. I don't know why people just assume that we did not receive anything, but that's not the case. And I know that I said my father was also biased with Molly, but he was definitely not in the same boat as my mother. He was not blind to her flaws, and that's why we had a better relationship with him, I guess. Anyway, he's gone now, and I don't want to speak of him. I want to remember him fondly, which is why. I'm not saying anything negative about him. It doesn't mean that he was perfect, that's for sure, so you guys can relax with the comments about how I'm making my father out to be a saint. I'm really not. Update 4. Hey, so it's been a couple of months, and so far we have had absolutely zero contact with my mother and Molly, and we love it. It really feels like all the toxicity has been removed from our lives, and we're all very happy. And I'm happier than ever because I'm getting married in a week. The invitations were sent out about a month ago, and obviously, Molly and my mother did not receive any. I didn't think that they would even care about it, but a couple of my relatives told me that when Molly and my mother figured out that they were not invited to the wedding and everybody else was, since I guess my uncle might have told them about it as he is invited, they completely flipped out and started asking everybody else not to attend my wedding either. But so far, most people seem to have ignored them. I don't know what they even hope to achieve, but they will not attend my wedding because I don't think that they have that sort of sway in the family, at least against me. Anyway, I found it amusing that this was going to work because it just became an excuse not to interact with my mother and Molly, since they had been acting quite insufferable in the last couple of months. Apparently, my mother had put up our old house for rent and moved into the penthouse apartment that Molly had been raving about. It also gave Molly an excuse to continue living with her mother because she wouldn't be able to afford that apartment on her own in a million years. And also pretend like she was doing a great service to her family by still continuing to live with her mother and taking care of her. So, she put a positive spin on her pathetic situation and portrayed herself as the hero, and my mother just went along with it and portrayed herself as the helpless little woman still relying on her daughter and ever so grateful to have her support. Well, good for them, I guess. If nothing else, they at least would have made brilliant actresses and storytellers. But anyway, Percy's magazine is doing well, and I'm hoping that he becomes even more successful in the future. And as for me, I'm getting married to the love of my life while also managing to have a successful career. I guess everything that Molly had said turned out to be wrong, so joke's on her.